Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today is my part 2 video where I did the Democrats if they have an amazing night on the 2026 Senate map. Today's video is the flip side of this. This is if the Republicans can buck historical trends and then have an amazing night in 2026 and what their realistic sort of best case scenario could be. So if you watch that video, you'll know I had a lot of states where the Democrats improved on their margins. And for instance, like Texas was likely Republican, as well as Montana and Florida and South Carolina. And I said in this one, for the best case scenario for the Republicans, where they have an amazing night, say President Trump's approval ratings remain the same or like go up from now until 2026. I think a lot of the likely states would end up being over 15 points Republican, which would make them safe Republican. Just to give you an idea of where things stand right now, President Trump's approval rating currently sits at 48% on realclearpolitics.com, 48.8% disapprove, a overall spread of negative 0.8%. Still, honestly, very, very high. Some of the highest Trump has ever been. He started off his term around 51%, so he has fallen about 3 points, but that's still some of the highest he's had as his time as president so far. As for the congressional approval or congressional vote for 2026, currently the Democrats lead in the RCP average with 45.3% for the Democrats to 44.5% for the Republicans. Still, obviously, a long ways to go until 2026. A lot of undecided vote, a lot of things to be determined from now to then. As for the 2026 Senate map, I have the Republicans starting out with 50 Senate seats, Democrats 39. 11 seats are either a toss-up or I want to talk about further. And I'm going to start on the western part of the country and looking at the state of Colorado. Colorado, we just saw the Senate elections in 2022. The Democrat won it by 14.6%. That is a likely Democratic win. In 2020, Hickenlooper defeated the Republican incumbent Cory Gardner by 9.3%. That is also a likely Democratic win. At the presidential level, we just saw it go for Harris over Trump by around 11 points. That would also put Colorado as likely Democratic. In the Republicans' amazing night scenario for 2026, I still think Colorado would stay in a likely Democratic margin. I don't think Republicans could do well enough to get it down to lean Democrat, but I do think it's possible Colorado would be likely Democrat where the Republicans have a great night and it doesn't go over that 15% threshold. Next, we have the state of New Mexico. New Mexico is interesting because at the presidential level, we just saw it go for Kamala Harris over Trump by about 6 points. At the Senate level, in 2020, it went for the Democrat Lujan by 6.1 points. In 2024, it went for Martin Heinrich, the Democrat, by 10.1. So it has also been likely Democrat in all three examples. This one, maybe it'll be a little bit more competitive than Colorado. Maybe it could squeak down into lean Democrat. But for now, even when New Mexico looks like it could be trending into lean Democratic territory, the next election always goes back up to likely Democrat. So I think that trend in New Mexico continues, leaving New Mexico as likely Democrat. This has the Democrats up to 41 seats. Republicans still remain at 50. Now we have the state of Virginia. Virginia is fascinating because we saw President Trump do much better in 2024 in Virginia, losing it by only 6 points, 52-46, the same numbers as New Jersey, funny enough. We'll be getting to that one as well. At the Senate side of things, we saw it in 2024 go for Tim Kaine in a likely Democratic margin, about 9 points, 8.9%. In 2020, we saw Mark Warner win it by about 12.1%, another likely Democratic win. So if the Republicans had a great night over the Democrats, could Virginia go down to lean Democrat? Again, it's possible. We did see Glenn Youngkin win the governor election in 2021, but that was after Joe Biden was president. Typically, Virginia in the governor's races does the opposite of what the president's party is. So there would be a lot of historical trends Virginia would have to buck to be able to get it into lean Democrat. It's also worth noting Virginia is still considered a likely Democratic state, really at best, at the presidential level. So I think Virginia would still stay as likely Democrat, even in the Republicans' amazing night scenario, but I don't think it would be anywhere near a safe Democratic state either in 2026. Now we have the state of New Jersey. New Jersey is a really fascinating state because, as I mentioned, it was a lot closer in 2024 than many people, including myself, expected. Harris only defeated Trump in New Jersey by about 6 points, and if we want to get really technical, we can look at the presidential numbers here. It was about 5.9%. Virginia was 5.8%. If you told me New Jersey and Virginia were only going to be off by 0.1% in 2024, about a month before the election, I would have thought you were crazy. But Trump did very well in New Jersey. He outperformed, and New Jersey is now one of the states Republicans are targeting very strongly for 2026. In 2024, the Senate race, I went for the Democrat Andy Kim by 9.6 points, and in 2020, it was a safe Democratic win for Cory Booker. So Cory Booker, I do expect to outperform what the margins are in New Jersey than Andy Kim and Kamala Harris did. The question is, do I think he would still get a safe Democratic win? No, I don't. But I don't think Cory Booker would perform poor enough to make it a lean Democratic state either. So I think at the Senate level in 2026, New Jersey could be a likely Democratic margin yet again. And that actually compiles a trend of New Jersey being a likely Democratic state along with like Virginia and Colorado instead of a safe Democratic state like Massachusetts or Rhode Island, which would be a trend in it of itself. So this puts the Republicans at 50 still. Democrats are up to 43. Now the 7 remaining states are where things are starting to get more competitive. And I'm going to start with the state of Minnesota, because Minnesota, I'm very skeptical on how competitive it will be. Because at the presidential level, we saw Donald Trump lose to Kamala Harris in the state by about 4 points. This would be enough to put it in the same category, almost based on the election results, as like Nevada, which was 4 points, and Arizona, which was 5. So Minnesota, I think you could consider to be a battleground state at the presidential level, but I would call it more so a battleground state that leans to the Democrats. In 2024, Harris won it by 4.2 points. 2020, Biden won it by 7.1. And in 2016, Clinton won it by 1.5. So 2 out of the last 3 presidential elections, Minnesota has been a lean Democratic state with President Trump at the top of the ticket for all 3 of them for the Republicans, and not a safe or likely Democratic state. On the Senate side of things, it's been a different story. On that same ballot where Trump only lost Minnesota by about 4 points, Amy Klobuchar won re-election by 15.7%. That is a safe Democratic win. Meanwhile, in 2020, Smith, the Democratic incumbent, only won the state by 5.2%. That is a likely Democratic win. In 2022, I don't believe there was a special election. There was not. So Minnesota, you could really make an argument, depending on who the Republicans nominate. This could be a state that goes either a safe Democrat, likely Democrat, lean Democrat. It's really all over the place. So you could make an argument one way or the other. I'm more of the mindset that I think Minnesota remains a likely Democratic state, but likely Democratic much closer to the 5-point side than to the 15-point side. Like, I think a 5 to 6 point win in Minnesota for a Republicans' amazing night in 2026 is certainly conceivable. My main worry for the Republicans in Minnesota is when President Trump is not on the top of the ticket. Republicans don't really have too much of a strong presence in Minnesota, but maybe Republicans could do well in 2026 in their best case scenario where the national headwinds sort of push them and do well in Minnesota. But I am going to leave it very barely in likely Democrat, though seeing Minnesota go down to lean Democrat is something I certainly understand and could see happening in that scenario. Now we're going to the state of Ohio. Ohio, we did just see vote for President Trump in the presidential race by about 11 points. On the Senate side of things, it's had some actually very close elections, where in 2022, J.D. Vance won it by about 6 points. That's likely Republican. 2024, Bernie Moreno won it by 3.6 points. That would be a lean Republican. Who the Democrats put up as the nominee certainly matters, whether it's Sherrod Brown or Tim Ryan or someone else. But I think Ohio probably, regardless, I think starts as a likely Republican state for 2026. It's possible the Republicans have a great night. They can get it maybe into safe Republican, but I think likely Republican for Ohio, even in the Republicans' amazing night scenario, I think still stays under 15 points, but definitely above 5. So I would have Ohio as likely Republican. Now we're into the 5 battleground states or Senate seats that I really am closely watching, and I think could conceivably all in the right scenario go for the Republicans. First, I'm going to start with the state of Georgia. Georgia, the presidential race was a 2-point win for President Trump in 2024. On the Senate side of things, it's actually been a very, very close lean Democratic state recently. Warnock won it by 2.8 points in 2022 against Herschel Walker. In 2020, Warnock won the special election by 2.1 points, and Ossoff won the state election by 1.2 against Purdue. As for 2026, I think this really all hinges on does Brian Kemp run for Senate in 2026 or not. If Kemp is the Republican nominee, I do think Georgia goes back to the Republicans and does so in a lean Republican margin, which for the point of today's video, I think in an amazing Republican scenario, it does involve Brian Kemp running for Senate and winning the seat back. If Brian Kemp does not run, I think at best, Ossoff would still win re-election, but he would do so by under 1 point. But in the Republican amazing night scenario, I think Kemp runs and wins re-election, or wins a 6-year term in the U.S. Senate from Georgia. This puts the Republicans at 52, Democrats at 44. Now the state of North Carolina. North Carolina is going to be one of the absolute toughest fights in the 2026 Senate map. President Trump just won at the presidential race by about 3 points. That would be a likely Republican win. At the Senate level, Tom Tillis won it in 2020 by just 1.7 points. That is a lean Republican win as well. 2022, Ted Budd won it by 3.2 points. That is another lean Republican win. If you want to go back to 2016, Burr, the Republican, won by 5.7. That would be likely Republican, just barely. 2014, Tillis won it by 1.6. Again, lean Republican. North Carolina is really close, and I think will always remain close. In this amazing night scenario, I think Tillis wins it again in a lean Republican margin. I think there's a realistic chance that, in just like my unbiased prediction for 2026, Tillis may actually lose re-election in North Carolina. So I think him winning it in the amazing night scenario for the Republicans, lean Republican, makes a lot of sense. Now we have the 3 remaining battleground states. I'm going to go to the state of Maine first because this is the one I think I'm most confident in my call. In Maine, it's a likely Democratic state at the presidential race, 52% to 45% for Harris over Trump. At the Senate level, for Angus King, it is a safe Democratic state. For Susan Collins, it seems to be a likely Republican state in 2020. Back in 2014, on the Great Republican Night, it was safe Republican. I can't really see Susan Collins getting that safe Republican numbers again, even with the best case scenario. A lot of it has to do with the polarization of the United States politics that we're doing and dealing with right now. But I think Maine going likely Republican over 5 points under 15 in 2026, and the likely best or in the amazing scenario for the Republicans is certainly possible. This puts the Republicans at 54, Democrats are at 44, with 2 remaining battleground states, New Hampshire and Michigan. This one, and I'm going to start with New Hampshire, is purely candidate dependent. If Chris Sununu runs for the state of New Hampshire, I think this puts the Republicans at a great position to win New Hampshire, regardless if it's a great night for the Republicans or not. New Hampshire, at the presidential level, more recently than not, has been either a lean or likely Democratic state. Actually, I'm going to show the exact numbers for New Hampshire just to illustrate this point. New Hampshire went for Harris over Trump by only 2.8%. So a very, very close, very competitive, and that is a lean Democratic state. In 2020, it went for Biden over Trump by 7.4. That's likely Democrat. 2016, it was tilt for Clinton versus Trump, tilt Democrat. 2012, it was likely Democrat, barely for Obama over Romney. 2008, likely Democrat for Obama over McCain. So New Hampshire, throughout the 2000s, has been pretty consistently a somewhere in between likely and lean and tilt Democrat. So it's not going to be a safe Democratic night. But the candidate quality that Chris Sununu presents gives the Republicans a real pickup opportunity here. In 2022, Sununu won re-election by a safe Republican margin over 15.5 points. In 2020, Chris Sununu won re-election by almost 32 points. 2018, he won it by 7 points, and then 2016 was first elected by 2.3 points. Sununu got stronger pretty much in every single election and not falling behind that safe Republican margin. In an amazing night for the Republicans in 2026, it would be something like Chris Pappas versus Chris Sununu, or either Maggie Goodlander versus Chris Sununu. And I think in an amazing night, Chris Sununu could very well win the state of New Hampshire. But the Democrats still have an advantage at the Senate level when it comes to New Hampshire. When you look at the recent Senate elections in New Hampshire, 2022, Hassan won in a likely Democratic margin. Shaheen won in 2020 in a safe Democratic margin. So the Democrats have the advantage. So I think Sununu would win under 5 points, but I think Sununu at the top of the ticket could definitely win. If it's Scott Brown instead of Chris Sununu, in the absolute best case scenario, maybe Republicans would be able to tilt and win this race, but I'm far more confident the Republicans winning New Hampshire if Sununu is the nominee than if Scott Brown's the nominee. That leaves the state of Michigan, where 55 Republican Senate seats, 44 Democrats. Could Michigan actually go red? And when Donald Trump is at the top of the ticket, Michigan does go red. It went for Donald Trump in 2024 and in 2020. At the Senate level, Michigan has not voted red without, or even come close without Trump at the top of the ticket. But it almost did in 2024. Elisa Slotkin won by just 0.34%. In 2020, it did go for Gary Peters over John James by 1.7%. So a very close race in 2020 as well. In 2018, in the very Democratic, when the Democratic Great Night midterm, Stabenow, the Democrat, defeated John James, the Republican, by 6.5 points. So Michigan's biggest problem for the Republicans, in my view, is getting a top-tier Republican candidate. Right now, it looks like the former nominee in 2024, Mike Rogers, is the Republicans' best chance at winning the seat, and he wasn't able to win it on the same ticket when President Trump won. So that does make me a little bit skeptical about his chances. But in an amazing night for the Republicans in 2026, I do think it's conceivably possible Mike Rogers could eke out a victory in Michigan. Seeing Michigan with a red Senate seat in 2026 is not impossible, and it is certainly a possibility. I would not 100% bet on it. I would bet on being a close race, but I would not feel the most confident in that happening. But in an amazing night for the Republicans, it is certainly possible. So with that, with my amazing night video, I have the Republicans conceivably getting up to 56 Senate seats, 44 for the Democrats. This is hugely contingent on the Republicans landing top recruits in Georgia, in New Hampshire, and in Michigan, and essentially every national historical trend that shows 2026 should be a very good night for the Democrats essentially needs to get thrown out the window for this map to happen. But in a more unbiased prediction of 2026 right now, I don't think we see Michigan go red. We're waiting to see if Sununu runs in New Hampshire. Otherwise, I think New Hampshire probably stays blue. In North Carolina and Georgia are going to be pure toss-ups. But in the Republicans' best case, 56-44 I think is certainly realistic and something that could happen. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a like. Please leave a comment below telling me your thoughts about this video. Also, make sure to hit the subscribe button as I post at least one new video every single day that you're not going to want to miss. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next video.